What is the highest physical pain you've ever felt? I have trigeminal neuralgia, intense pain across the face that bores into your eye and jaw caused by the trigeminal nerve misfiring. It's considered one of the most painful conditions people can go through and has the wonderfully pleasant nickname as suicide disease, which is lovely. Anytime I have an attack I want to rip my face off for a solid hour or so. When I was 4 we were getting our driveway paved. It was a hot 90-degree day and my friend and I were playing tag. I was in chasing my friend, who was 3 years older and significantly bigger. We ran down my stairs when my friend jumped over the 4-foot-wide gap of steaming hot asphalt. I, being 4 and not knowing any better, tried to jump this gap only to land and sink about an inch deep into this asphalt. I ran into the house with the asphalt stuck to the bottoms of my feet. Mom quickly put my feet in a tub of ice water and drove me to the hospital. I'll never forget the pain of taking my feet out of that water to the sound and feel of literal sizzling pain. This resulted in third-degree burns on the bottoms of my feet, cast and crawling on my hands and knees for a little over a month. Edit. The pain when the doctors were peeling it off of my feet and the skin coming off with it was an equally as bad experience. TL, doctor, bare feet and newly laid smoking asphalt. When I was 17 I had my hip replaced. All was fine until they removed the epidural, and I had to learn how to walk again. The first time the physiotherapist visited me in my hospital bed, she was manipulating my leg to get it moving again and prevent it from becoming too stiff. She accidentally pulled a little too far one way, and I almost passed out from the pain. The replacement itself I can fully recommend, it's been life-changing, but some aspects of the recovery process are an absolute bitch. Holy shit, that must have been terrifying. Dislocated my knee. My patella was in my calf. Go home patella, you're a drunk. Emergency C-section without enough anesthetic. I am so sorry you had to have that C-section without enough anesthetic. My mother had a friend back in Venezuela, and when she gave birth to her youngest they didn't even give her anesthetic for a C-section. My mom was there for the entire operation as support, and she said she has never heard somebody sound like they were in so much pain before. Last I heard her friend still has nightmares occasionally about being cut open. It's horrific. Testicular torsion. Basically the cord holding your balls knots, which cuts off the blood supply. When I had torsion age 11, they anchored the affected testicle down during the operation to stop it happening again. Now when I cough only one testicle retracts. Kidney stone, hands down the worst. Had a bacterial infection in my testicles when I was 13. It was like repeatedly being kicked in the balls for a week straight. Edit. This also led to one of the most humiliating moments of my childhood. My dad took me to the doctor for a diagnosis and was sitting in the room with me when the doctor was checking me out and asking various questions. One of the first few things he asks me is, "Are you sexually active?" Now, 13-year-old me had just discovered porn and in my mind I was like, shit, I didn't know masturbating could cause this type of thing. Why did no one warn me? So I answered yes to this question. The doctor leaves and says he has to get the stuff for a urethral swab. I'm freaking out at this point. My dad and I sit in awkward silence for what seems like forever when he finally asks, "So who have you been active with?" C&T? 2 girls I was hanging out with a lot at the time. It then clicked with me what sexually active actually meant, which I then had to explain to my dad. He was nice enough to explain my misconception to the doctor who did not have to swab my urethra, thank God. Shit, why didn't I use a throwaway account for this? Edit 2, it was in fact epididymitis. In college I didn't take very good care of my contact lenses. I had partied and slept in them a couple days in a row, then went into the bathroom to take them out. Not thinking I grabbed them both with my thumb and forefinger and pulled. They stuck to my eyeballs. Ripped off the front of both my corneas. Instantly dropped to the floor in pain. Took 3 of my buddies to carry me into the ER. Was blind for 2 weeks. I never wished that kind of pain on anybody. While playing soccer I was kicked in the head and ended up blacking out for a few seconds, so quick no one really noticed. First thing I realized was that there were black spots in my vision. I went over to the sidelines and a few minutes later I started seeing plaid. Yes, like Spaceballs plaid. My mom called her eye doctor and he told me that I was about to get a migraine. I thought, that doesn't sound so bad, but then a few minutes later I couldn't even speak properly anymore. It started becoming gibberish. Once that happened my mom threw me in the car and started speeding towards the hospital. Then the pain started to hit me. OMG, I wanted to die. You poor migraine people. I had no idea, just no idea how awful something could be. I am a tough cookie and that pain was ridiculously bad. I kept passing out from the pain and waking back up in pain for several hours. They wouldn't give me anything for the pain because they didn't want me to slip into a coma. I was so mad at them. Could they not see that it didn't matter? I wanted to die. So what if I fell into some silly coma? At least the pain would be gone, hopefully. I actually had some brain damage from this. I had a few seizures over the years until my brain slowly healed itself. It took about a week for my speech to properly come back. My mom would ask me things like, what movie do you want to watch, and I would say Jedi Come Back instead of Return of the Jedi. Once I was home they thought it was pretty funny. TL Doctor, concussion-induced migraine. Duck migraines. Edit, and yes. I was Duck King, sorry. Smile. Spinal tap/intrathecal chemo injections for leukemia and a bone marrow transplant. They put very long needles directly into my spinal column, and withdraw about a liter of fluid. Then they use a needle in the spine to inject a yellow chemo called methotrexate. They have a hard time getting the needles between my lumbar spinal bones, so they have to stick several times, and slide the needles back and forth to slot the needle properly. I also get hip bone biopsies, where they drill a hole through my hip bone, and then extract marrow and stem cells from inside my hip by suction of the plunger on the needle. The extraction of the marrow hurts the most. Then they wiggle the drill bit to snap off the bone fragment to extract it to test. There are more parts of the treatment that aren't any fun, but luckily I have morphine to get me through. Edit, fix spelling from typing on my phone. Edit number 2, I can't believe all of the great well wishes and comments. This is my highest rated comment. Thanks everyone. Edit number 3, thank you for the sweet Reddit gold, you wonderful sir/madam. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I was making pancakes in the kitchen one morning. My toenails were a bit longer than they should have been, and I caught one on a cabinet lip as I stepped forward. It peeled my big toenail halfway up. I thought that if I bandaged it and left it alone, it would reattach. A week or so later, pus was oozing out of the bandages, and I realized it wasn't reattaching. So I decided to remove my toenail. I drank a bunch of vodka, sat down in a corner, and pulled my big toenail from the infected socket with a pair of pliers. It was unpleasant. Edit, people liked my toenail story, so I have one more for you. This one actually pissed my wife off. I had this goiter-looking, wartish, nipple-looking thing growing on the center of my back. My wife didn't care, and it didn't really bug me too much, but my nephew was busting my balls about it while we were swimming, and it seemed to be growing. I decided that in the interest of self-preservation, I needed to get rid of it before it got any larger and became sentient. I took a couple shots of vodka, took off my shirt, and headed into the bathroom with a serrated steak knife. I turned around so that I could see myself in the mirror. I pinched that bad boy, pulled it out as far as I could, and sawed it off using the knife. The pain was intense and sharp, my nerve had that feeling you get in your mouth when you suck on a penny. As soon as I started cutting, I could feel the warm, sticky rush of blood over my fingers. I bled ridiculously. I grabbed a nice towel to clean up. My wife was pissed that I ruined her towel, and mad that I would cut something off of my own body. Anyway, we're still married, and that little back nipple never grew back. In 3rd grade I got kicked in the balls with steel-toed boots. I had to go to the emergency room for internal bleeding in my testicles. That was not a pleasant experience. Who wears steel-toed boots in the 3rd grade? The teacher. I got hit in the newts by a lacrosse ball going 61 miles per hour. I ejaculated a little blood like 2 days after, and that scared me to death. Nerve dying in my tooth. Camera inserted in my urethra to look at my bladder. I wouldn't wish that pain on anyone, anytime, anywhere, ever. Terrible migraine headaches. I know it doesn't sound as sexy as some of the rest of the answers, but a bad headache can be excruciating. I get them pretty bad too. It's not the sharpest pain, but they last so long and it makes you want to give yourself a lobotomy to ease the pain. One time I had a stomach bug with bad diarrhea and vomited constantly. While dry heaving from having puked all my insides out, I thought, well, at least I'm not having a migraine. Badly broken collarbone. It hurt to breathe. I literally saw stars. I literally saw stars last night. When my appendix became inflamed, it felt like a flaming metal octopus kung fu fighting an electrical storm. A swirling, slushing and thrashing torrent of agony. They had to pull it out. As an aside, the X-ray tech who ran the scanner asked how the hell I managed not crying like a baby. I fell 30 feet out of a tree and shattered my vertebrae. Ended up having surgery to fuse my L1 L3 with some rods. That wasn't the painful part. All of the pain meds plus the anesthetics completely shut down my bowels. I literally went 3 weeks without taking a shit. Finally drank 2 large bottles of magnesium citrate to get things moving. I spent the next 8 hours with intense abdominal pain. I had to shit so bad but it just wouldn't come out. That on top of me trying to push was killing my recently fused spine. At one point I gave up, laid a towel on my bed, and curled up in a fetal position on top of the towel. I decided to just shit myself laying in bed. Eventually I was finally able to pass the giant cork shit and did so on the toilet. That shit was by far the most painful experience of my life. Melted the skin off my fingers with hot bacon grease. The only upside is that they smelled like bacon for a few days. Being electrocuted in my groin. My ex was a psychopath. Holy shit. Story time? A few years ago I was having a little blood with my bowel movements, not like serious hemorrhaging or anything, just a bit of frank blood when I wiped. I went ahead and decided to get it checked out, and was diagnosed with anal fissures due to my rectum being too tight. I made a joke about how being careful with my money was a trait I had inherited from my grandfather, but the doctor didn't laugh, so I took my finger condoms and my prescribed rectal cream, and went home to shame myself every time I took a growler for the next month. It didn't work. So I show back up at my doctor and he decides that he needs to take a closer look at my insides, and maybe remove a piece of my rectum. We argued briefly about the absurdity of removing a part of a thing to make it bigger, but I lost, so he cut me. Things went pretty well in the recovery room. The colonoscopy had introduced plenty of air into my large intestine, so I was able to put on quite a symphony for the other patients, and I was still pretty loopy from the sedatives, so I was apologizing profusely to the nurses in case I had said anything inappropriate, and then they let me leave. I had some Lortab for pain, which I took as prescribed for the next 24 hours, but they made me itchy and groggy, and besides, my pain wasn't that bad, so I decided to stop taking them. I also decided to leave town and not even take the Lortab just in case. This proved to be a bad idea. At the time I was working as a nurse's aide, and when I checked people's vital signs, I would dutifully ask the two, rate your pain on a scale of 0 to 10, 0 being no pain and 10 being the worst pain you can imagine. Sometimes people would rate their pain at a number higher than 10, and I would condescendingly explain they could not pick a number higher than 10 because it didn't make sense under the guidelines which I had painstakingly laid out for them. Sometimes I would go on to explain that, in my view, even rating their pain at a 10 didn't make any sense, because it could be worse. Right? They could have bamboo shoots under their fingernails, or their teeth crushed with pliers, or a hangnail. Right? Well, after the Lortab wore off, I wanted to go back in time and yoke myself in the ear for being a dick. At that moment, I felt like someone had placed my asshole in a bench vise and was tickling it with a branding iron that had previously been stored on the dashboard of a black Honda Civic that had been left at the Dallas/Fort Worth airport parking lot while I went to Europe for a month in late July, then briefly tempered in a vat of habanero juice. I never could have imagined that something could hurt so bad, and I couldn't even really wrap my head around it at the time. Fortunately, I only had to put up with it for a few days. I almost home now, and I am really looking forward to that Lortab. TL/Doctor, a male Rosie O'Donnell impersonator curb stomped me while wearing heels during chemo. So, sometimes, because your white cell counts start dropping, they give you shots to make your bone marrow produce new cells really fast. The doctors decided to give me twice the normal dose because my counts were super low. One of the side effects is that there's severe bone pain. It's so deep in the bones that you don't know where it's coming from. It felt like the pain was part of my very being. There was no one spot, and no painkillers could help. And it went on and on for months. Chemo and surgery and radiotherapy and even the damn cancer seemed like a breeze compared to it. I appreciate being pain-free so damned much now. Edit. What was weird was that my pain threshold is really high. I didn't feel a thing during hip bone/marrow biopsies, where they drill into your bone to extract marrow. Felt like such a loser during the whole treatment phase, though skeptical. So much for being brave. But thanks so much guys, smile, I'm all recovered now and pain-free. And I'm so sorry for those of you that had awful situations. Skeptical, here's a hug. Edit 2, ha. Cannabis. Sigh. No, they didn't give me any. They definitely should have though. Not me, but my husband has had some ongoing skin/tissue issues with his penis that were causing him to have issues voiding. Several times over the years I held his hand as nurses and doctors tried to insert catheters, and it was always painful, but he always got through it. The day that the doctor accidentally lacerated his bladder with a wire tool while trying to stretch some tissue. I had never seen him in that much pain, screaming, tears, and then just whimpering. They rushed him into surgery. The gas chamber during basic training. Our sadistic drill sergeants made sure the gas was extra thick. It felt like I was burning to death. Edit. Thanks for all the responses, peeps. Here I am with some friends I met in Iraq. Labor. Never give birth unless necessary. I puked from the excruciating pain of contractions before they gave me the epi. It was awful. Never again. The time I accidentally set my hand on fire was pretty bad. Second-degree burns on all but the pinky finger, and as an extra fun touch they weren't able to apply a nerve block at the ER. I've had my shoulder dislocated multiple times, had to pop it back in myself. That's pretty bad. I've had my knee blow out, where the leg bent totally sideways at the knee instead of backward, to where my foot touched my butt. That was a horrible pain. The most memorable pain I can think of is probably a tooth infection. It's an incredibly sharp, unbearable pain that I rank as worst, in memory, in no small part because there is no escaping it. There is no comfortable position you can get into that will lessen that pain even a little bit. So yeah, tooth infection probably my worst because you can't get away from it. Thanks for listening to another episode of Reddit X. Subscribe and activate the notification bell so you won't miss any stories. Feel free to share your own stories below in the comments. Have a good day.